We are live. Top footballers have been biohacking at Euro 2024 to help give them an edge. A number of players are wearing Oura rings and doing breath work. Others are drinking a concoction known as a fuel bomb containing pickle juice. And more are using cryotherapy, blue blocking glasses, and polyphasic sleep. Today, discover what's working best for them and see what you can incorporate into your own life to enhance your own performance. This is Biohacking News. Yes, hello and welcome to Biohacking News. I'm Tony Wright. Before we go any further, please do like and subscribe. I've made a grave error, as you know, probably if you watch or listen to this show regularly. I live in Portugal. I've just been on a hike just before this podcast. I'm now an absolute sweaty mess. So apologies for that, but what can you do? The show must go on. Jane Tarrant is a breathing retrainer based in Oxfordshire. She retrains the breathing habits of overbreathers, including snorers, and works with, amongst others, footballers. That's why we wanted to talk to you today. Jane, lovely to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Are you as hot as I am in Oxfordshire right now?
No, I'm wearing a hoodie in Oxfordshire, and I'm quite toasty now.
Good. Okay, now, so on today's show, we are looking at Euro 2024. I was absolutely... Now, we need to put a bit of a disclaimer in at this point. And that is that people watching this live now on X or YouTube or LinkedIn are getting bang up to date information. But when this podcast goes out, some of the footballers that we talk about might have gone out of the tournament. And that's okay. Let's start then with Ronaldo. I was absolutely transfixed by his performance in this last 16 match where he missed a penalty. He then had this big cry in the middle of a game and then under huge pressure came back and scored the first penalty, which helped Portugal go through to the next round. And Ronaldo, if you like, is our first biohacker on Biohacking News today. He incorporates all sorts of different techniques, including polyphasic sleep, we'll talk about that a little bit later on, hyperbaric oxygen, and breath work. Now, Jane, is this Jane Tarrant approved breath work that Ronaldo is doing?
So it depends what he's doing. And it's a case of we can look at breath work being a hack effectively that you're doing to gain a result. Or we can look at what I really love, which is the beyond breath work. So we need breath work, but we also need beyond breath work breathing habits. So we're going to hopefully tie the two together today.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. So I'm absolutely fascinated by breathwork, and I have a feeling that it is one of the areas of biohacking, if you like, that I could benefit from the most. And that is because I know when I'm, say, last night, for example, I had Euro 2024 on. I was preparing for today's podcast. I was writing all the sort of the different biohackers, the different football biohackers, and I realised after about half an hour, I'd not taken a breath. If I actually oxygenated properly, it would be so lovely. So, what is the difference between breath work and beyond breath work, and how are footballers sort of using breath work?
So, footballers might be using breath work, for example, like before a game, if they're feeling nervous, they might be calming their breath right down, slowing down the exhale especially, and calming the nervous system. Very, very simple. It's the sort of thing that, CEOs will be doing before talking to their entire teams. People will be doing before interviews, that sort of thing as well. So it's not complicated, is that element. It's just calming your nervous system down, preparing. But we're also allowing ourselves to open up our airways and open up our blood vessels by making sure we're not plummeting too much carbon dioxide. So checking in and doing that when necessary is crucial. We can also work on training as though you're sort of doing sort of high altitude training. So we can use breath work, so controlled breath changes in order to get the result of that. And so you'll be using that during training, not obviously on the day of the match, but you'll be using breath work to calm yourself and kind of recover. What I want to look at though is the bit that football is missing, as are many others. So I've recently started working with a professional footballer, and I can't tell you who it is because it's confidential. So when they want to go out, that's great and let you know. But this person has been through Harley Street. They've been through doctors. They've been through physiotherapists. They've been through everybody. And as far as they're concerned, they're kind of now just stuck. They've played in the the top league, and their clubs aren't checking for these sorts of things because the lack of awareness in the human population is so high that we're not actually addressing very easy to see issues. And what happens is when somebody's an overbreather, they are breathing too much all the time.
Right.
And if you expect a high level athlete who is slumping on the sofa, not standing quite correctly, doesn't actually know how to breathe, slightly over breathing, slightly too fast, slightly too big, often through the mouth. I watched some football the other night and I was like, how are they all with their mouths open? Like, what is, they're not even the recovery, their mouths are open. What's wrong here?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's that feeling of like, well, if nobody's told them, then how are they meant to know? But how you're actually breathing all day and all night is going to impact you in those moments of sport. If your habits are poor normally, are we really saying that when you intensify that, they're going to get better suddenly? They're going to like become this optimal habit? It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to switch into that. So what happens is somebody who's only slightly over breathing all day and all night, when they go and do sport, they're over breathing for that scenario too. And when we can reduce our breathing, most people think it's all about getting more air. It's not. It's about holding on to more carbon dioxide and delivering more oxygen.
Okay. So our first footballer, biohacker, is Ronaldo. He incorporates various breathwork techniques as part of his extensive fitness regimen. He uses controlled breathing exercises to manage stress and improve focus before and during matches. And he's obviously really committed to optimizing every aspect of his physical and mental performance. And as I said, I was preparing all this last night, and then he ended up taking part in a penalty shootout. And seeing him having already missed a penalty, already dissolved into tears in the middle of a game, which, by the way, never happens. Extraordinary scenes. And then seeing how he dealt with it, what he did is he sort of took a few steps back, took a step across, and then took this huge, deep breath, which, seasoned football watchers will know that is part of his routine. But is that something consciously that he's deliberately introduced to his regime, and is that the right thing to do at that point?
So realizing that he needed to adjust his breath and doing so is exactly the right thing to do. When you said the words huge deep breath, this is like a really big red flag to me, and something that I have to address in what I do. So a lot of people have taken their breathing education from something like yoga, or from their friends or family, or cartoons, or something that has shown them a sort of deep breath as lifting into the upper chest, this big puffing up, expansion everywhere sort of feeling. And this is what we think a deep breath is for many of us. And what I want to address is that that's not a deep breath, that's a big looking breath. It is an over breath for what you need. But deep means deep. And I'm currently wearing an upside down tree on my jumper, which is representing lungs. And deep really means down the trunk, through the branches, and into that canopy at the bottom. And if I halve the tree with my hands, you're left with just a few leaves at the top and the most of the leaves at the bottom. And that's where all of the gas transfer happens. So if you're using huge amounts of energy to lift into a very compacted space with a lot of wasted space versus utilizing your diaphragm and pulling it down, then you're not going to be as efficient, but you're also exaggerating unnecessarily. You will still get relief from a big looking deep breath because it still calms you because you're slowing down. But is it how we should be breathing deeply? No. And so when I work with people who are already like lovely breathers, shall we say, I'm looking at them just sitting there, I can see the beautiful movement. And then I say, great, take a deep breath. And they suddenly go up. And I'm like, no, where did you learn this from? But it's this perception of what we think it is without having had any real education. And the fact that he's done that, whether it's big or not, doesn't matter because it still helped him in the moment. But everybody who watches that will then think that's a deep breath, and it's not. This is the interesting area. So it's the subtleties that I'm so passionate about, the subtleties that we overlook because we've never, ever been told about it.
What about mouth tape? Because I don't know about footballers. It didn't pop up in terms of my Euro 2024 research, but I've recently met some sportsmen and women from other sports who are starting to use mouth tape. I personally used mouth tape for a few years, and I've got out of the habit now simply because I think I sleep with my mouth closed. But I did notice quite a difference when I started to use it.
Yeah, so I personally mouth tape as well. So I use kinesiology tape, just like what you use with a physio on your elbows. And I have a strip down the front of my mouth with the outside where you can kind of cough still. So, for example, for the last 3 years, I haven't lost my nose to a cold or COVID. If I have a cough or a sore throat, I wear mouth tape all night. So I cannot breathe in air through my mouth by accident. And it allows a huge difference in terms of recovery, and especially if you get sick. Yeah, young kids like to cough in your face and stuff. So,
Yeah.
and we got a lot of footballs with kids as well. So this is a first change. The second part, though, is that it will give you another, let's say, 8 hours of beautiful nose breathing that you can guarantee. The problem, though, is when people try mouth taping too early. So people who are prone to feeling panicky if they haven't got enough air, or they're what we call their CO2 tolerance is not high enough. So when they hold their breath or they have restricted nasal passages due to a kind of congestion while they're asleep, they build that carbon dioxide up, and then suddenly their body triggers and tries to bring on more breathing. And so this can end up with you sort of finding your mouth tape in your hair and on your pillow and halfway up the wall, where is it in the morning? So people will try it often too early, and they can either freak out or just find they've ripped it off in the night without realizing. Whereas when you train for it and you're at the right levels and you know how to decongest your nose properly with air and with just a few moments on your own rather than having to flush it out, then mouth tape is wonderful. But it's not for everyone. But should people be considering it? Absolutely, if it's right for them. And it's a case of checking out a little bit more about whether you are ready, whether you feel comfortable, whether you've trained your CO2 tolerance.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I sort of thought I noticed when I used mouth tape, I noticed some funny benefits, including even that I was going to the loo less in the night. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah. So mouth breathers will often find they get more thirsty, often drinking like a pint of water. And we lose around 42% more water through mouth breathing than we do through nose breathing from some study that's been done on this. The amazing things that comes out of studies.
Yeah.
So, I'm often telling people, I meet people in saunas quite often because I go for saunas, and I'm like, did you know you're going to be losing 42% more moisture through your mouth? And they're like, oh no. And they close their mouth very quickly. But it's this feeling of, when we are interrupting our quality of sleep through mouth breathing, we start to see these changes. So yes, you might feel more dry mouthed, more groggy in the morning. You might get up for a wee in the night when you wouldn't usually, because otherwise you're in a different sort of form of sleep. You might find that you're snoring, and obviously then you've got a grumpy partner as well as you're feeling not so great as well. So we can have lots of layers to the nighttime. But again, I retrain snorers and mouth breathers. A huge part of this is, where's your tongue in your mouth? Is it in the correct place, which we can train in the day to help at night? Are we toning up the airways and making sure everything's held open? And are we actually breathing at the right rate rather than the sort of rise and dump through the upper chest and this hard, fast breathing that we've normally done? Have we actually reduced that down to a beautiful sort of, a gentle wind that doesn't flap a flag versus the gale that's, smacking a flag against a pole? The difference when you get that kind of wind. So it's all these layers to breathing habits that matter. And if you want to improve the nighttime, you need to improve the daytime. And if you want to improve your sport, you need to improve your daytime and nighttime to improve the sport.
I spent the morning with someone today who works with hyperbaric oxygen, and he was saying that various breathing techniques, when you get it right, really enhance these other biohacks that you might be using. So let's look at what Cristiano Ronaldo is also doing. He has 6 90-minute naps over the course of 24 hours, which is quite extraordinary. I don't know how he does it. It doesn't sound very compatible with a normal life. And apparently he wears a fresh pair of pajamas for each one. And he eats a total of 6 meals on each of those days. Breakfast, 2 lunches, a snack, and 2 dinners. He uses cryotherapy. He's got his own cryotherapy chamber in his house costing 45,000 euros. And he likes hyperbaric oxygen as well. I mean, this is an extraordinary regime, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what conversation we're having here. Are we talking about how to be a professional footballer on the top salary and that's everything? Or are we talking about what can we learn from them to be in other situations, whether it's just the general public wanting to optimize or whether it's other footballers who do actually have a family life around and train and, whatever. So
Yeah.
we can be doing these things. Is it optimal? It's a case of taking it back to just what are we doing as humans and does that work? And I think it's hard to say that's the right thing to do just because one person's doing it as well. For me, I like to get all my sleep at once. And if I start to have naps, it will probably change kind of how I feel about going to sleep later. And there are lots of people saying different things. One is have a nap in the day, and the other one is saying don't have a nap in the day. Make sure you're getting daylight early in the morning and making sure your circadian rhythm's right. So there's a lot of conversations around here that I think people have got to trial for them and see what works.
Yeah, I think I might tell my wife after this podcast that I'm going to start sleeping for 6 90-minute chunks over the course of every 24 hours, and I'm going to have 6 meals a day. So it's not very compatible with family life, but it sort of works for him. And then just on the beyond breathing that we were talking about, what you said that you're working with a professional football at the moment. What is the sort of thing that footballers or the rest of us can, as you say, can do to enhance our breathing and our performance?
Absolutely. So there are different types. So you've either got somebody who's, for example, asthmatic and has sort of some sort of condition, or you've got somebody who just considers themselves normal. The first things that we can do are focus on our tongue. So if I ask you right now, for example, where your tongue is in your mouth, is it at the bottom of your mouth against your bottom front teeth? Or is it the tip at the top in the roof and the rest is relaxed? Or is the tip up and then the whole thing is up into the roof of your mouth? Or is it up but slid forward onto the back of the front teeth?
I think it's the front of my tongue is on the top of my mouth.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then the rest is relaxed away.
and the rest is relaxed away. I think. Yeah.
So if it's in that position and you open your lips, could you technically breathe through your mouth, even just sips?
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this isn't the correct tongue position.
Oh.
So, so we'll try it, and people can try it when they're listening. But
Oh.
if you put your tongue in the N spot, so either say N for no or
Yeah.
N, and get that tip into the roof, but it's not touching the front teeth. It's just slightly pulled back on the roof of the mouth.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you've got the N, it's a little bit like a skiing. You wouldn't go skiing with just your toe in the boot. You'd always click your heel down too and then ski off. So get your N spot, that's your toe. Now bring the rest of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. Okay, it's sealing off the roof. So now you can't breathe through the mouth, even if it was open, because it's sealing the top. Then you close the lips, relax the face, relax the neck, and just notice the easy, quiet, open flow through the nose. Just feel how spacious it feels. And then to compare this with really poor tongue posture, which a lot of people will have, is keep your lips closed, but drop your tongue heavy to the bottom of your mouth. And notice if it starts to feel restricted through the nose, tighter, faster, just by changing your tongue position. So having our tongue in the correct position not only helps us develop our face as children. So if we're looking for the next generation of footballers, please tell them this because your face, your airway, your teeth, your nose, everything is impacted by where your tongue posture is as a child when you're breathing and swallowing. And if it's not in the right place, if you can't get it up there because your teeth are too narrow and crooked already, that's when we start looking at one, use the tongue to open up, but there's even early orthodontics now that are helping children's faces to be opened up because we're working against modern society with like ultra processed food, lack of chewing, lack of breastfeeding, all the reasons that we're struggling with, lack of the good nutrition, as well as this mouth breathing and snoring habit we're seeing in far too many kids. So a lot of adults will be also impacted through how they were as children, just like me. I have a very, very narrow upper palate. And
Right.
I really have to like origami my tongue into the right place. And without, further orthodontics, I'll never have a comfortable tongue position, but I can still get it up at the top. As a kid, though, my nose felt too small because I wasn't holding my tongue in the correct position. And that is the difference between giving up and going to your mouth. And a lot of footballers will be doing this. A lot of top athletes will be doing this because they just don't know.
So just to reiterate, you want to get as much of your tongue sort of up, really.
Yeah, so it needs to be not touching the front teeth,
Mm,
slightly slid back. Then
mm,
it should curve right up into the top. And some people will find their tongue is touching the front teeth and they can't, it's up, but it's not fully beautifully curved. So you pull it just slightly back and you get the beautiful contour along the top. And you shouldn't be like forcing it up through your forehead. It's just like try and relax it slightly so it's not hurting. But we need to train our tongues again, get them into the correct place because so many of us have just
mm.
dropped and never been told. And then we go for a run or something, and then we're like, because we change, and then we never go back.
Right.
So footballers on pitches are like, they look like dog tired.
Mm,
But if they were to be able to use their nose, and if they were to be able to retrain the use of that and the tolerance to that, they would be recovering a whole lot quicker when they're not actually doing the serious running around.
wow. Wow. So that's and you mentioned obviously kids. I've got a 5-year-old. Is this something? I mean, maybe I should be teaching him.
Yeah, me too. So I actually, not to plug it, but I recently wrote a book on this because when I was that 7-year-old thinking my nose felt too small, there was no education till a podcast when I was 30. So, and nothing much has changed. It's getting on there. So I wrote a book on this called Rose Loses Her Nose, and it is like a little storyline that teaches kids all about why you should breathe through your nose and the healthy elements of that and what a deep breath looks like. And at the back, it teaches what I call the 3 spots of breathing of N spot, D spot, and R spot. So your nose for the N spot, your D spot for your diaphragm, and your R spot for your ribs. So we can
Mm,
learn how to retrain our breathing. But with 5-year-olds, what I'd be looking at is, are there any gaps between their teeth? Because there
mm,
should be. And if not, there's not enough space. Are they crooked? Are they thumb sucking? Are they finger sucking? Are they having their mouth open at night or during the day? Are they slack jawed? And then also we're looking at, do they maybe have a tongue tie? I had no idea
mm,
my daughter had a tongue tie. I breastfed. It was quite painful for the first latch on the first week, but then it was fine. It turns out she had just enough of a tongue tie that I missed it because I'm not trained in looking for tongue ties.
mm.
And then it was just impacting the very back of the tongue coming up, just enough to stop her being able to force her teeth out with her tongue properly when she swallowed. So I've just paid privately to have her tongue tie released so that she can actually develop her face better just using a tongue. And I will be looking at private orthodontists as well.
Wow. Wow. If
And
we look at a couple of the, sorry,
no,
carry
carry
on.
on.
I was looking at a couple of these other biohacks then, and how that might relate to what you've been talking about. Away from Cristiano Ronaldo, England have been using the Oura ring. They're believed to spend more than 12,000. I'm very happy about this because I've been wearing the Oura ring for a long time. Gareth Southgate and his players, and even the England staff, have each been given an Oura ring to wear during the tournament. I don't think they're wearing them on the pitch during the games, but for the rest of the training. And they monitor everything from sleep quality to stress levels and heart health. Really interesting on HRV. Conor Gallagher and some of the other players have been seen wearing them in training. Southgate seems to be wearing his as well. The Oura ring costs £421 now. Kim Kardashian wears one and Prince Harry wears one as well. And what I'm interested in is, have you noticed that when you look at people's breathing habits like this, their Oura ring stats go up?
So I personally am not a huge tech fan in my training. And it's not that there's not relevance to having tech, and it's not that there aren't good things in numbers. It's not my interest area. My interest area is getting someone to connect with their own body and understand
Mm,
what's going on without relying on a computer to tell them. Because if you want to adjust your own breathing throughout the day, you've got to be a little bit more connected than that. Oura rings will give you a lot of data in the same way the Apple Watch is now starting to give you, or the plan is to give you data soon on whether you might have sleep apnea. And the conversation here is, look at those stats, look at, whether your SpO2 is being impacted, look at all the data it gives you in terms of heart rate variability and everything else. But what it's not going to tell you is if your posture is just slightly out for breathing,
mm,
whether you're just slightly over breathing. It might tell you how many breaths you're doing per minute, but it's not going to tell you whether that was quality, whether that was too much. It's not going to tell you the bits that really, really add up to make the difference over the 20,000 breaths a day.
mm,
So, as much as I'd love to have a technology conversation with you here, I don't wear one. I don't wear the watches as well. And actually, when I work with certain clients, especially those who freak out when they haven't had a good night's sleep before like a talk or something, I actually tell them to take them off because they can create more anxiety around a situation. And some of the people I've spoken to in the sporting world find that it's the anxiety that they want to do so well that actually is making it worse for them as well. And by focusing on numbers in that moment can be really challenging for them. So it's not that they're bad, it's knowing when to use them and when to pull away and just focus on your body.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to be honest, I agree. And yet I see a massive amount of worth in wearing one, because when you do something like, for example, when I do a breath work in the evening before I go to bed, the heart rate variability stats go through the roof, and it tells you it's working, you know?
Yeah.
And I certainly noticed a bump in my HRV stats when I first started using mouth tape as well, which I thought was really interesting information. That said, when you wake up and you've had 4 hours 36 worth of sleep, you're absolutely gutted, and it does have a bit of a negative impact on your day. And then they recently changed the Oura algorithm, and that meant slightly less sleep a night. It's really gutting. It's almost sleep stats go down. So that's where it doesn't work quite so well.
Yeah, and actually sometimes it's a case of, with my clients, sometimes they give me data, and it's wonderful to hear from them when they do, or they record their snoring or whatever it is, or their lack of snoring. But if you wake up in the morning and you feel refreshed, that is kind of what matters. Whether it told you whether you should be feeling refreshed or not is not the point. The point is whether you feel refreshed, or whether you feel ready to go, whether you feel better, whether you have energy for your kids at the end of the day, whether you're allowed back into your bed because you're no longer on the couch. That's what matters. Whether you can last 90 minutes in a football pitch rather than struggling at 60 or 70, that's what matters. So the Oura Ring is important, but I think we give too much focus to technology and not actually thinking about what does it mean for me and what's motivating for me. But people do like numbers, especially guys. I think they love a bit of tech and a bit of numbers. So
love numbers. Love numbers. Now, Jade, I know you, away from breathwork, I know you're an enthusiastic biohacker. So let's look at a couple of these other, because you were at the Health Optimization Summit, weren't you, a couple of weeks ago?
I was.
And let's have a look at a couple of these other biohacks going on at Euro 2024 at the moment. Kieran Trippier is drinking pickle juice. He appeared to suffer from cramps during a game, fell to the ground. The physio ran on, gave him some sachets. Everyone was like, what's that taking? He's taking pickle juice and a high carbohydrate drink known as a fuel bomb. And apparently pickle juice is used by athletes and biohackers, I guess, because it helps combat muscle cramps. It's got vinegar, sodium, and potassium in it. So are you going to be going out and bulk buying pickle juice?
No, actually. But then
I'm not going to either.
I'm not a professional footballer, so that means I don't have to go to that extreme. But also, I would always be looking at obviously what I know first and trying the basics first before I'm trying something different. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. I've heard things about bicarbonate soda. Not that I'd say you should go and do it. There's research on it though. There's lots of different hacks we can be using.
Yeah.
But I'd always be like, before you go and buy a pill or ingest something, have you got the basics right? Are you oxygenating yourself well? Are you doing, the right sort of mobility or whatever it is? So I love these things, but I always think we're so ready to get the new, like the exciting thing, that we're actually missing the basics quite often.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's very relevant for the biohacking world, and a good reminder. The last one, so we've covered Cristiano Ronaldo, we've covered the pickle juice, we've covered the Oura rings, we've covered the hyperbaric and the cryotherapy, obviously all things related to breath. The last one that I've got, Erling Haaland, one of the best footballers in the world. He's not playing in the Euros, as Norway haven't qualified for a major tournament since 2000. But he is famous for his biohacking. Loves all the sorts of anywhere where he can get a little 1%, 2%, 5% edge. And he is one of the first professional footballers to wear blue blocking glasses, orange tinted lenses at night that protect the eyes from blue light frequencies. So that's smartphones, computer screens, TVs. And obviously he's not playing the Euros, but the reason I put this in is because last night, as I said, I was preparing this podcast that we're going to be doing today, and then there was the football on the telly, and then it went to extra time and penalties, and I thought, why am I not wearing my blue blockers? And I put them on, and I felt my whole body give a lovely big sigh of relief. So well done, Erling Haaland. I don't know if any other of the footballers are wearing blue blockers. Are you a blue blockers wearer?
I have worn them and sometimes do. I've got to admit, I've lost them. I think I lent them to my husband and they've gone missing. So, so I'm just trying to not be on screens as much in the evening, but I don't
Yeah,
always get it right. But I do like to put my phone to bed. So I
lovely.
literally sometimes I actually go and put it to bed and like put it in like a little sock or something. So I've literally gone and like my put my daughter to bed, she's 5, put my phone to bed, and then it's a nice little reminder that no, you don't get it back out again. It's tucked away, which is
Very
quite a
good.
nice way of doing it.
That's great. Yeah. And because we've both got 5-year-olds, I'll give you a little 5-year-old biohack. I mean, this is actually better for us than blue blockers, really, but we have these blue light blocking lights from Bond Charge, and they're just red lights. But when it comes for story time, we switch off all the lights and we've just got a red light on in the room, and it's actually very, very relaxing. And you can feel that it is a little bit more like the sort of campfire light that would start to get our boy ready for bed. Then obviously, you need some sort of light to read his book, but you're not using a bright light. So that's worked quite well for us.
That's amazing. I think I try and follow the concept of first thing in the morning,
Mm,
daylight before screen light,
yeah,
and get out as early as I can, get my feet on the grass, whatever I can just to kind of ground and do the natural, easy, cheap things. And then I will work with just bringing the light down. So I'll have bright lights, and then as I go down, it's just lamp light and further. Although we did have a lot of fun in our house. My husband loves to like install like gadget things. So he
oh
can do
yeah,
it from his
great.
phone, and he can do it. And I'm like, I just want an old fashioned light switch. And he puts all these things and then they go wrong. And it's some Chinese cheap thing. And I'm like, so now I've got to bloody walk around and turn them all off, or like they're pulling on and off at different times. So yeah, lamps can be, it can create a lot of difficulties in households if you are tech and non-tech and they all go wrong.
I certainly can. Yeah. I mean, in general, though, all of these sort of things, is really interesting, and it is really interesting talking to you about the sort of the tweaks that we can make with our breath. I'm really interested in digging into what you do a little bit further. Um, let's have a look at a review then. Obviously, this podcast is going out live, but for people listening to the podcast on the feed, the main podcast goes out, and then we do a review episode a few days later. It's just a few minutes. What is a practice that you use? It can be related to your area of expertise or not. It might be tech, a technique, a supplement, a practice, a lifestyle hack, a gadget that you would like to review today. What have you picked?
So for me, it's kind of what's become my new routine. It's multi areas, but basically finishing with
Mm,
cold exposure. So I'm a proper wuss. I hate the cold, always have. The idea of a cold shower is like the worst thing in the world to me, and yet, I recently joined up a few months ago to David Lloyd, and I've been going there and like doing either a class or a bit of, even just small, gentle swim, or, doing some sort of strength training, preparing for perimenopause. I'm only 35, but I am in training, got a nutritionist, and I'm like working on my muscles. So I'll go and sort of try and go down there about 4 times a week. And even when I'm not training, I'm still going down. I'm having a sauna for 10, 15 minutes at the moment, just depending on timings around actually work and children and all that. And then I'll go and have cold showers. And what's been really interesting is when I was at the Health Optimization Summit, I went over to the monk stand,
mm,
and that was incredible because it was my cold bath virginity that I got to take there with monks, so that was brilliant. And I thought I've been preparing for this for about 3 or 4 weeks, having a cold shower after a sauna, getting my head under, but this was 5 degrees, and
mm.
I just used my breath and went through it for like maybe 10 breaths, just calmly, minimally quiet, right into the very depths of the lung. And then I just slipped in, and it looks like I'm getting into a warm bath.
Mm.
And that was really interesting
Wow.
because I would normally have gone like, at the very beginning, I remember the first showers and I was like, oh, 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 just the shock and like, this is totally new. But actually, as soon as I connect with my breath and the cold together, I feel so much more alive after
Yeah.
doing that. I feel so much more recovered. Like when I was walking around all bloody day that day, I'm slightly hypermobile. So I'm aching in my hips and my back and my legs. Better since I wear barefoot shoes now, but it was still a long day, and I got back in a second time that afternoon, and it just took that away. And I did 2.5 minutes the first time and just felt chilled as anything. Yes, it was like biting and poking me with little needles kind of feeling in my skin, but actually being able to connect and just accept it and know it will make you feel good has been incredible.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing there is what's known in the trade as stacking your biohacks, because you've got the sauna, you've got the heat exposure, or you've got the cold exposure, but then you're stacking that with the breath work. And that's actually where the magic is working for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between it, I took somebody at David Lloyd the other day. I met someone randomly, as I do, in the sauna or wherever, and they were telling me how much of a wuss they were with even just getting into a swimming pool. And I got them to do a deep breath, and they obviously did the classic up into the upper chest. I was like, no, 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 no. And so I taught them the D spot, which is the diaphragm spot, which is in my TEDx as well, if people want to learn more about that. And you can bring the breath down, but it's got to come out at the right place and not in. And he was going the wrong way. So I adjusted that, got him to really calm down. And then I got him to go head first. And he went in for about 3 different blasts of this cold shower. And he was like, oh my God, that was not so bad. And it was just being able to connect with the breath and calm the nervous system and go in with a very different approach to this upper chest, freaked out, anxious feeling where it feels horrible. But when you're calm, you breathe out through that moment. And then by the time you finish your out breath, you're fine.
Yeah. And are there any other circumstances where you might stack breath work with something else? I mean, I can't quite think what it might be, but it might be that you could use it alongside hypnosis or red light exposure, or I mean, certainly you mentioned the sauna there. Where else does sort of breath work pop up?
So if we're talking about breath work and the concept of adjusting your breath for a result, obviously there's the kind of Wim Hof style of breath work, which is much more sort of hyperventilation or, these transformative sessions. This is a totally different end to what I'm generally dealing with. And I think it's important to separate that from calming breath, which is where you're slowing your heart rate on the exhale, you're calming the nervous system, you're feeling safe in just a day-to-day and breath by breath moment. But when you are adjusting and consciously breathing in this way, I personally think it should be attached to everything. Whenever I go to yoga or Pilates or any form of class, focusing on my breath will always make me feel so much better than if I don't. Knowing how to slow it. But equally, there are people that are going to sessions like this and they're kind of looking across being like, how are they breathing so slowly? Or why are you telling me to breathe so slowly when I can't? And it's either they're going into restricted parts of their body, so they can't actually expand beautifully, or they're hitting their CO2 tolerance, which has reduced because they've been over breathing for so long. So it's this area of breath work's wonderful, but what if you can't quite access it? And that's where there's usually a problem. And that's obviously what I deal with. So stack it, but notice when you find it hard and realize that that's where we want to be being aware of it, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, I look forward to finding out more about the footballers you're working with, and where can people find out more about what you do and improving their own breathing?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at Link Breathing. LinkedIn is one of the places I hang out the most. I like to be on LinkedIn. It's just a different vibe. And also Link
Says a lot
Breathing.
About you. No,
well, LinkedIn, you can go there without having to feel that you have to live up to the expectation of reels.
Right,
and you can be who you like. You can write stuff. You can get, and it's generally the content on there is shite. So you stand out a lot better than you do on something where people have spent a long time getting better. But also, you can find me at linkbreathing.co.uk, and all my advice on which mouth tape, whether you're ready, whether you need a book for your children, whether you need to whether you want to come to a free masterclass. I do all of that on there because I want to educate as much as possible, but I also look at these extreme subtleties, and that's why the sporting world is so interesting.
Love it. Look, Jane, so good to talk to you. Thank you for playing along today with my ridiculous list of biohacking footballers. There are more out there, but those are the ones that I found. And of course, by the time this goes out, they might have all gone out of the tournament, but let's hope that's not the case. And thank you so much. Highly recommend everyone checks out Jane's work. For everyone watching live, thank you very much for joining us today. And for those listening to the podcast, the review episode will be up in a few days' time. And thanks for watching. See you again soon.